way for us to rationalize our positions on seemingly controversial topics. To clarify my stance today, yeah, I don't believe that women, and I use the term women here because it is exclusively for women that we've lowered PT requirements and standards and barriers to entry in the military and the police force as far as enlisted services, as far as combat roles, infantry, for example, beat cops. So that's why I use that example. I don't believe that they should be in roles of physical combat where they would encounter violence for a multitude of reasons, largely because of safety issues, both for them, but more importantly, their squad mates and the citizens they're sworn to protect. Okay. If you disagree with me, I'm more than happy to hear why and change my mind.
All right, so I know you said like your main concern with it is the women joining are lowering the PT requirements. So I don't.
The military has lowered it so they can join.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that that should mean that women should not be in combat roles. I mean, if your problem with that is that the PT requirements are being lowered, I don't think the PT requirements should be lowered.
Okay.
Because I know that would mean that like technically less women would be able to join.
Yeah, it does.
Because like testosterone and stuff, but I don't feel like that should mean that like just women shouldn't be in combat roles in general, because there are those like exceptions of women who are just like
it's fine.
Women who are just like naturally stronger or bigger or like stuff like that would be able to keep up with the natural PT requirements. And just like there's men that can't keep up with PT requirements.
Sure.
That's why like when you're looking at like officers or like military or police, they're typically held at the standard because they're able to keep up with the requirements.
But not women, actually. That's the problem. They're held to a much lower standard. But I would agree with you. So it sounds like you're suggesting a physical meritocracy, which is if you pass the tests, then you should be able. Okay.
And I understand that would mean that like
I would agree with
would join.
Yes. Well, we went from 2% of women in the 70s to 16%, and we've lowered the PT requirements consistently, and even just recently in the Army created a gender-neutral test that less than 10% of men failed and 65% of women failed. This is still a really low test. I mean, yeah, sorry.
I mean, that's
there
expected,
are no more
testosterone, and like there's...
Right, but it sounds like you're saying they shouldn't be lowering those tests. We should have the rigorous tests that we did.
We should.
And if women met those, they could be in those roles.
Yeah, and I
I
understand there'd be a lot of women that wouldn't be able to make it.
Sure.
But
and men. And I agree. The men who don't meet those standards shouldn't be in either.
Men and women who wouldn't be able to make it.
Right.
But I think that my problem with the statement is just it was very broad, because like there's always exceptions, and there's a lot of women that I could just think off the top of my head that could make it.
Well, I would bet you it's not a lot off the top of your head.
At least 5.
At least 5. You think these women could do the same amount of pull-ups as men in the Marines?
Maybe close. I'm not sure. I wouldn't know them on a personal level, but.
On a personal. I was going to say very few.
Just like
okay. I was going to say very, very few. For example, right now in the Marines, this stat kind of blew my mind. Is a woman in the Marines can do half as many pull-ups as a man and get a perfect score. And that's not the only standard I'm using. I'm just using it because it's a very clear metric. But when we're talking about this, the reason this is broad is because legislatively, the only reason that our standards have been lowered to the point of them being, frankly, kind of embarrassing for our military is to accommodate women. We haven't changed them. You know, the beauty of a physical meritocracy is it's blind, whether it's race, gender, you pass the test or you don't. But we have lowered the standards throughout all branches of military and in a lot of police forces to accommodate women. They still fail at a much higher rate anyway and get put on the force.
Well,
and as a result, they're hurt more, they get injured more. If they're female cops, they get violently attacked more. So do their squad mates. So if we're talking about, yes, there are individuals, exceptions, sure, but they could have made the cut a long time ago. Not enough of them could, so we lowered the standards. And that's what I have an issue with, is legislatively, it is exclusively for women.
Well, so I feel like...
Does that clarify, though?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, because I don't, like you said, lowering the PT standards could result in just like injuries for themselves and their squad mates and just like the people they're trying to protect in general.
Right.
So my only issue with the statement is it just said women, like, and obviously I knew that's just like a broad statement. So like,
well, it's hard to fit it all on the side and say,
like,
because from 1971 to this, you know, we went from less push-ups to no push-ups. We went from pull-ups to less pull-ups to no pull-ups to not even doing a leg tuck. Like, that's tough to fit on a sign, but that's the policy of the militaries, to be more inclusive, and to be more inclusive, they're less ready.
I don't think inclusion should matter for things like I get like people want like inclusion here and there, representation, like stuff like that. But like when it comes to like serious
You just
things,
rolled your eyes. I just saw that. Inclusion.
inclusion.
Sounds to me like maybe you're tired of that a little bit.
a little bit, yeah. But I'm saying when it comes to like things like the military, the PT standards, I don't think they should be dropped, because even though that'll mean technically less women will be able to join, I think the ones that would join would be the ones that actually belong and like would be able to keep up
Right.
and like actually like do their job professionally.
And that was a policy for a long time.
Yeah.
But because of progressive legislation,
Yeah,
it's
no, I don't
changed.
agree that should have changed. I think that I don't think you should lower the limits for other people to be able to join. Like I don't think a man who wouldn't be able to do it shouldn't join. I don't think a woman who can't do it shouldn't join.
And that man should preferably be laughed at.
Yeah.
Mocked mercilessly.
No, not laughed at, but like
Mildly shamed. Hey, let me ask you, because it sounds like we agree we found common ground,
Mm-hmm.
Olivia. You have a USA wrestling shirt. Do you wrestle?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you wrestle here for the school?
No, I tore my labrum pretty bad.
Ugh.
I might join next year. I'm not sure.
Do they have a wrestling team here at this school?
Yeah, there's actually some wrestlers over there.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Well, that's a
But,
perfect example. Take the best female wrestler,
Yeah.
right? Who you can picture.
Randy.
How would
The coach.
Okay, the coach. How would she fare against a man of her size, average
Like-
in high school?
Like an average high school man.
I mean, an average man her age size, and who would be in her bracket?
So, are you like can I get like a view on what this man's like is he like a novice, like, because she was an Olympic bronze medalist, so she pretty much knows what she's doing.
You ever watched Kayla Harrison roll with hobbyist men? She was a judo gold medalist twice. Or who was it? Sarah McMahon fought Ronda Rousey. She was a silver medalist. As someone who's done submission, it's not even close. It's not even close.
Well,
And
yeah,
it's not to take
no,
away
I
that they're
like
great for a
the-
woman, but the strength
Well,
differential
no,
is
'cause
so
that's actually a topic that I'm like really like, what's the word?
passionate about.
Passionate, yeah,
Let me hear it, because you do have
Like-
biological men going into women's wrestling.
Because I hate that, and I know a lot of people want to be like, it's inclusion matters, but by taking like biological men and allowing them to compete in women's sports, you're taking away from the biological woman, because you're gonna have all these biological men dominating the categories,
Of course.
and then you'll confront someone about that, and you'll be like, well, if it's just a coincidence, and if testosterone doesn't play a big role in this, then how is it they'll go from like the like 150th best in the men's category and then instantly to the first in the
Right.
women's category. Like there's a reason we have a men's division and a women's division.
Yeah, I agree. Now, and that's why we're here today, because I've done men should not compete in women's sports. Biological men should not compete in women's sports. And boy, was I met with screeching from
No,
the people
'cause
who are
that's a true
discussing.
statement.
But take that, and instead of wrestling, because most sports are sort of they're analogous to war. That's what I mean. Football, you look at sort of gaining territory. So take the wrestling component, which we both agree on, it's unfair, then apply it to them going out into the front lines, and they're fighting other men. So it's like taking a women's wrestling team and putting them against, for example, Syria's men's wrestling
Yeah,
team.
that's why I said you need to take like not just like an average woman. It'd have to be more of like an elite woman to be able to join combat positions, like without lowering the PT standards.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And even then, it'd still be few and far between.
Yeah, it would be a way smaller amount, but it would be the amount that needs to be there.
Hey, do you want to hear a stat that might blow your mind? It says actually specifically as it relates to grappling. So I was looking at the strength differential. Since we found common ground, I hope you feel that we've both been respectful. This has actually
Yeah.
been enjoyable. It's a welcome break from some of the people on this campus. So there are these studies you can find, and they were largely conducted in Japan, that a woman is 60% as strong as a man. And I was thinking, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And then when I looked it up, well, these were studies in Japan, and there's a very big difference between, for example, Nordic, males and females. The men are much bigger than the women than Japanese men are to Japanese women. These were very limited instances of like a leg press, where they would sort of measure the actual contractile strength of the muscle, but not in a practical fashion. So, in that same study, I believe, or in that paper at least, they measured grip strength. And this is important in wrestling. It's particularly important in judo because you're grabbing fabric.
Yeah.
Most women are weaker in their grip than 95% of men, but they took women from judo, from wrestling, from Olympic weightlifting, the most elite Olympic athletes, female athletes, and their grip strength was still weaker than 75% of men, the strongest women. That did surprise me.
I'm not denying that like
No, I know, but isn't that kind of surprising? Like, wouldn't you think
I mean,
an
I'm
Olympic
not-
athlete would be like less than 75% of men's grip? Like,
I
that's
wouldn't
crazy.
even be too shocked because like I think like because of like TV and like all like the roles that like certain like women are put in where they like just have like
They beat up 5 guys.
yeah they have like a chick beat up
like
5
Atomic
guys.
Blonde,
It
she does it with a
becomes
stiletto.
like it becomes like kind of like a normal thing to think about. Oh yeah, a woman beat up 5 guys. But if you really think about it, I don't think a lot of people think about like what testosterone can do.
Yeah.
Like and like that there is a difference between men and women.
Yeah.
When it comes to
And not just testosterone, but
like the
all
average
kinds of,
man and
I mean,
average
you know, luteinizing hormone, right? Follicle stimulating hormone. You look at everything with men, like the bone density, fat storage
testosterone is
fibers.
just a lot of stuff.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think, look, I think what you've said is very reasonable. I think as a woman with skin in the game, because you know you wrestle, what I've been asking, I've actually met quite a few women here who really have been wonderful to speak with. I would ask you, of course, I'm not forcing you, this is not patriarchy, that you present your reasoned viewpoints on a campus where they would be less than popular when women bring up the kind of arguments that I encounter. We need women like you who are well-spoken, who understand the differences, to be able to speak out, because I do think that a lot of women are afraid if they have a differing opinion from what they're supposed to have. A lot of girls have expressed that today, and that makes me sad. Because men aren't afraid to bust each other's balls. Women are generally nicer.
Yeah, not me, but
No, well, hey, you're wrestling. I hope. Are you getting surgery on the leg?
I already got it. I'm in
Did it work?
rehab. You know, I don't think it did. But
No. Did they do it? Is it less mobile because I had to tighten it a little
yeah,
bit? Yeah.
I'm still working on
Yeah, that happened. I don't know if you saw T.J. Dillashaw fought recently, and he had a shoulder reconstruction, and it just popped out in the fight in the UFC. He was a good wrestler, and that's tough to recover from. But if it's just your labrum back here, I've seen people who can.
It turned into a slap tear though, so they said
Yeah.
it might be a little more complicated.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, Godspeed with it, Olivia. I appreciate it. Thank you for sitting down.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate it.
Well, that's always a nice start. And take care of that labrum, Olivia. Hope you're back on the mat soon. That brings us to another female wrestler, Ploy. And let's just say there was a bit more disagreement during this exchange.
So, Ploy, Stephen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And how is Ploy spelled?
Ploy.
P-L-O-I. I had a 1 in 2 shot of getting it right with Y or I. I thought it was I didn't want to risk it. So, Ploy, I don't know how familiar you are, if at all, with kind of the Change of Mind segments, but it's designed to hopefully allow people to rationalize their positions on seemingly controversial topics.
Okay.
It's been largely respectful today. Every single conversation has been pretty productive, so I'm happy about that.
Okay.
It seems that there's a shift that's been taking place. The conversation today. I do not believe that biological women, should be in combat roles, meaning enlisted services, for example, police roles that would involve violent altercations, because of the fact that they are not only physically less capable, but it also brings up safety issues as it relates to not only themselves, but their brothers in arms. And I say women just because it could be men who don't meet these PT requirements either, but we've only systematically lowered the standards in our military police force for women, and they fail anyway. And I think that's a bad thing.
So I was talking to the guy over there before about it, and my take was on, so I think it's an issue based on the format on how we test it between men and women rather than it being an issue between men and women. Because the example I used is, so I'm a wrestler. I'm on the wrestling team in my school. I'm here. I wrestle right there.
Is that Olivia? Was she one of your friends?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from New York. I was on a boys team. We always start off every year with 60 guys. Okay, let's say including me, 60 people. End of the year, always 20. For me, it was always like, I asked him, I was like, okay, so let's say we raise the standard. Let's say, because your issue right now is you're saying that the standards are lowering because they're allowing more women in. But
no, they have lowered the standard. So just to be clear, let me just be really clear, is they had a standard, right? Women didn't pass it. So we went from 2% of the enlisted forces.
Are you
to
saying
now
no woman passed it at all?
Very, very few.
Very few. So there are women who pass it.
Right.
Okay.
But then we lowered them. We created 2 separate standards, male and female standards. For example, like in the Marines, a woman can do half as many pull-ups and get a perfect score, which I think is asinine. Then we created a gender-neutral test. Less than 10% of men fail. Still 65% of women fail. So no matter how much we continue to lower the test, where we eliminate, for example, pull-ups in the Army, we eliminate push-ups entirely. We change the times required for both men and women. Women still fail at a higher rate. So all of the physical metrics that we've used, we've lowered for women, and it hasn't had good results.
Okay, but here's the thing. You're saying that you're saying very few, but there are women who pass.
Sure.
Okay. Your question is right now is women should not do any combat sports. So are you including the woman who did pass?
I didn't say combat sports.
You said, I'm sorry, combat roles. My bad.
Combat roles. Yeah. No, if we're saying, for example, if your position is, hey, if we return to the standards of the 70s, for example, the same exact standards that were required of men, and women met those, sure, let's say yes.
Then you would disagree with the statement.
I would disagree. It would be based on real-world data because
Okay.
we don't. Here's the thing: we don't have the data from those women, right? We do have the data from the lowered standards.
Okay.
2 times the bone fracture
Okay.
rates, right? 65% higher physical disability discharge rates.
Okay.
For every percentage point you increase a squad of police with women, every percentage point of women that you add to it, the chances of them being the victim of violence, the entire squad goes up 20%. So we don't have the real world data of those elite capable women.
Okay.
But if we did return to those standards and the data would bear out that they were just as capable, I would have no problem with it.
But wouldn't it be an argue not on women then, and based on, you're saying like the standards have lowered so much, wouldn't that be the issue on the standards?
Yeah, so that's a very valid point. Now here's the issue, here's why I say women.
Okay.
I think you're suggesting a physical meritocracy, right? If you pass the test, if you hit the requirements, you should be able to join. Yeah. Legislatively, we haven't lowered them based on race. We haven't lowered them based on age. We've only lowered them for women.
Okay.
And so legislatively, it's that those women shouldn't be in combat. There are plenty of women right now in combat roles who are supremely unqualified, and they make their squad mates, they put them in danger. Not to mention our country.
I'm not going to argue whether your statement biologically is true or false. I do believe women and men have a difference biologically. My only problem is that your question is hitting to all women. What about the women who do pass? What about the women who... I'm not saying... Okay,
But if they do,
I'm
then
not
fine.
questioning your statistics because I don't know, because I don't know whether your statistics are true or false, but I'm saying that before they decreased the standard, there were women who did pass, but your question is hitting all women.
Statistically, almost none.
Almost none. That's not none.
Okay, great.
So
Then why
there's
did we
still-
lower the standards?
I personally don't know. I don't think we should have. If you're talking to
Then we
me,
agree.
I think personally, when you're talking about police force, when you're talking about the military, I think there should be more money going into training. I know that right now training with diffusing situations isn't very good. There is barely any training on that. There's barely any training with guns. There's barely any training like in the police force. I don't know about the military. I'm not very familiar with that, but I know the training isn't as good as it could be, and I feel like for me, I feel like my problem, I came here for this, to talk to you. It's more like, one, my problem is with the question, because I feel like the question is way too generalized.
That's not a
I feel
question,
like
it's a statement.
the statement is too generalized, I'm sorry. And I just feel like my issue is more with, you're saying the standard rather than the biological
Yes, but
difference.
I've hopefully, let me try and clarify again.
Okay.
We have only legislatively, because of the modern feminist movement, lowered the standards, which I believe is sexist, because women are weaker and less capable than men. So we have only lowered them for women. We haven't lowered them for anyone else. And that's a bad thing. So the reason that I'm saying women is because this applies exclusively, the lower standards applies exclusively to women
I have a question.
from
and
a
it's-
government. Does that clarify it?
That does clarify
Yeah.
a little things. But my only question that I brought up to him is that,
You said a little thing. What does it not clarify?
oh no, sorry, it clarifies it for me. I meant I have a little thing that's
okay,
been
sorry,
bothering me
apologies.
that I need to clarify. I argued with him. I said, could you say that because of the technological advancements we have today in the military and in artillery, that there is a less physical demand in the military?
Here's the thing. Sorry, did you have more? I could address that question.
I was going to say, and you're saying combat roles, but there are a lot of combat roles that don't necessarily need as much physical demand.
Well, that's why I clarified. I said physical combat roles where you would encounter violence.
Well,
so
you could
I
be
have no
physical,
problem, for
but
example.
not completely physical.
Well, I have
you know
no
what mean?
problem, for example, with women in the police force, for example, being interrogators, forensic evidence, detectives. These are very important roles. These are pivotal roles. In the military, for example, combat roles, aside from the reflexes where women are not quite as quick as men, they tend to make very proficient pilots. I don't have a problem with that. I still don't have any problem with intel officer roles, or if it's, for example, drone operation, where these tests can be blind, right? The issue is the tests for physical combat readiness are not blind. They are inherently, I argue, sexist, in that they are embarrassingly low for women. And the real world, so we might say, sure, there are technological advancements. It doesn't change the fact that the bone fracture rate is astronomical for women the second you put them under load bearing, which makes sense because of less bone mineral density. The fact that they're discharged for physical disability at a rate much higher than men, and also, by the way, several multiples higher to be discharged with PTSD, to require psychotropic medication. So there is a psychological component where we've also lowered some of those standards exclusively for women. I believe that's inherently sexist, but more importantly, it doesn't make us a safer fighting force to lower those standards. But we've only done it for women.
Okay, when you're talking about psychologically, I feel like there is I feel like it is sexist towards men. I do feel like men should be taken as seriously when it comes to mental health in the military as women are, and I feel like there is both issues with both sides. But
That may be true.
my thing is now, so you're talking about physical combat roles. So instead of saying the statement, women should not be doing combat roles, would you say it is true to instead say women should not be doing physical combat roles? Because the thing is, you're saying you agree that
Well,
they
that's
should
what I
be
said when
outside.
you sat down.
Yeah, when I sat down. But the thing is, at the end of the day, those combat roles are still combat roles. They might not be as physical to many, but they are still combat roles.
Like I said, where any physical combat role, they were encounter physical violence. So if we don't want to use the military, go to the police force. Women should not be on the beat. Women should not be out there where they're going to deal with a guy my size on PCP. Absolutely
But
not.
even
It's
if
silly.
you are in IT, even if you are, like, when you are in the military, you're at risk
Well,
for...
I'm talking about police force because I think it's more clear here. So
Okay,
we're
so
talking
you're
about
switching
somewhere
to police force now instead of the military.
No, but I've said combat roles, and I've
Okay.
said both police force when I sat down. So if you're talking about drones, that's technically combat.
Okay.
I was very clear in saying, and let me restate, I'm not saying that women cannot be in the military. I'm not saying that women cannot be in the police force. I'm saying that lowering the standards, as we have done decade after decade after decade, to increase female recruitment as part of a diversity agenda, has resulted in more violence against women and a less capable military and police force. So in the police force, we're not talking about drones. We're talking about being out there having to apprehend someone physically. Women shouldn't be in those roles.
Why do you think they want more women in the first place then? Like, if there's this argument, why do you think they want more women in the first place?
Because we have this asinine obsession with diversity.
I think it's more like, in today's society, there are less and less men that want to join the military, and they need higher numbers. That's what my think is.
Well, here's what's interesting about that, because I actually went down a rabbit hole in
Okay.
this. I've heard this argument there's a recruiting crisis. But as we have increased our percentage of recruits in women, 2% to about 16% in enlisted forces, women make up about 13% of the police force. It's a little bit harder to measure because municipalities use different numbers.
Okay, wait.
But
so
they've increased.
Just clarification. Are we talking about the
Can I just
police
finish?
or military?
I'm giving you both.
Okay.
2% to 16. Let me really break it down so we
All
don't do the wordplay. 2% to 16% enlisted forces. Gone to 13% women police. Okay, it's remained stagnant since about 2000, but increased dramatically. As that number has gone up of women and we've lowered requirements, that's when we face the recruitment crisis. Now, I'm not saying it's because women have been enlisted, but it unequivocally cannot be argued that recruiting more women increases our capacity to recruit. The inverse is true. Correlation doesn't equal causation, but it cannot be argued that including more women increases recruits. It decreases it.
Okay.
Or at least a decrease occurs as we simultaneously increase female recruits. I have my theories as to why that's the case, but it's not observable in data. I'd be making an inference, but the data is what it is. So going back to the police force, well, like you said, you wrestle, right? And here is it freestyle wrestling?
Yes.
College wrestling? You wrestled in high school?
Yes.
So folk style?
Yeah. Well, I did freestyle too.
Did you do freestyle? Okay.
Off my school.
Did you do any Greco-Roman as well? I know that's more international, right?
No. My club did do it. I did a little, but I never competed in it. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit different when you take away any of the leg attacks. It's a totally different sport.
Not my type of thing.
Yeah, a lot of suplexing.
Oh, I love suplexing, just not Greco-Roman.
Well, I'm saying it's almost exclusively suplexing in
Yeah.
Greco-Roman, right? You don't do any. What's your favorite takedown? What do you usually use? You
I
go
like
for-
going for a high crotch.
Oh, like going for high crotch. So do you
Yeah,
do you
so
go in that
not
from like a low
Greco-Roman.
single and kind of ride it up to a high crotch? Do you chain it or do you just shoot high crotch?
I don't think you can hit a low single to a high crotch because then you'd go behind for a low single.
No, a low single where you'd go down for, or like an ankle pick where you'd go in and
Oh,
ride up to
ankle
the high
pick.
crotch.
I don't like that because
No?
I'm short anyway. I just like going right for the legs. Just
Right for the
drive-
high crotch?
Yeah.
A friend of mine, actually, a UFC fighter, Daniel Cormier, that's his go-to is a high crotch single. Yeah, it's just interesting to me because we've had this, for example, in wrestling. You're in college now.
Yes.
You wrestle any of the men?
No, but I did last year. Only until recently. It's my first time ever being on a women's team.
Oh, okay.
I've been completely, for the first time ever, we had a girl on my team besides me, but for the most part, I've always been the only girl.
Okay.
In club and in school.
Okay.
Well, I had two friends in club with me.
Yeah, and in college it's a little bit different. How do women fare with the men in college wrestling? If it's the same weight class, same division
We
of sports?
never wrestled. I haven't wrestled a guy in college. Because we don't even wrestle the same style, so we can't wrestle each other. Like,
Why
we
do you
wrestle
think women
freestyle.
don't wrestle the men?
Because we wrestle freestyle and they wrestle folk style. It's a completely
Well,
different
there are
style.
plenty of male freestyle wrestlers in college.
Not like
Certainly at the club level, yeah.
at a club level, but collegiately we're not allowed to.
Okay, so, but why at a club level do you think women don't wrestle men?
I mean, they do. My friend, she qualified for Fargo under Greco-Roman for men.
Why do you think that as a rule, when we're creating women's divisions and men's divisions in wrestling, for example, NCAA championships and certainly international wrestling, why do women not wrestle men? We can do the wordplay here. Why do women not wrestle men? It's not a trick question.
The thing is, I can't really answer that question because I've wrestled men my whole life. This is my first time ever not wrestling men. So I can't say why I don't, because I do.
And you're the only woman in the history of wrestling who beat them consistently?
No, there are.
No, there are not.
I want you to restate your question one more time. I'm sorry.
Would you be the only woman in history who, in a high level of wrestling, consistently beat men in your age, weight, and skill bracket?
No, because there are girls better than me who have beaten guys.
In your age, skill, and weight bracket on a national level, name me one female who won a national
I
championship
know
in
Heaven
men's wrestling.
Fitch won state in South Carolina. I don't remember what year it was. I was pretty young at that time. That's her full name. I know a bunch of
In
girls.
the NCAA, she All-American?
You're talking about college wrestling?
College
There
wrestling or
aren't-
college age club wrestling?
There aren't any females or males who wrestle together in college age, because that's when you
That
get
returns me
separated.
to my question. That's why I asked, why do they not? You said they do.
I
right?
said I did in high school.
No, but I said college. Club or college? You said it was a different style. So I'm going to frame this again. Collegiate level wrestling. You said I was wrong. When I said, why do women not wrestle men? You said they do. So now you're saying, no, you go back to high school. High school is very different. At a high level, why are there no women? Take Sarah McMahon, silver medalist, right? Fought Ronda Rousey. How would she
That's
fare
not
against that?
even. That's I don't even know what that is. WWE. I don't.
So she's a silver medalist in the Olympics in wrestling.
Oh. Because you said Ronda Rousey, and I thought you were totally.
She lost to Ronda Rousey,
Okay.
who was a bronze medalist in judo. Kayla Harrison, and these are people who, by the way, have been on my program.
Okay.
Kayla Harrison, two-time Olympic gold medalist in judo. And on the program, I say this because would we both agree that the only American to ever win a gold medal in judo, and she won two, probably qualified to discuss, she said it wouldn't even be close with men, low-level hobbyist men.
Okay.
Why is that?
I agree with that one because I do agree. I'd said in the beginning there is a biological difference between male and female between muscle mass.
Not just muscle mass, bone density, fast-twitch muscle fibers,
Sure.
reflexes.
Sure.
Right. So we would agree there's a reason that it's separated.
But when you said it to me in the beginning, I thought you meant in general, and I said I can't say that because in high school I've only wrestled male. I don't have the.
Sure, anyone can wrestle anybody. I mean, you know, you and I
Yeah.
could find a mat and
Yeah.
wrestle. It doesn't mean that it's competitive.
When you said why don't I thought you meant like back then. I was
No, I
like,
said, why don't women? Why do they separate the divisions? And I think we've roundabout way to both agree that there are strong biological differences between men and women. There's a reason that the divisions are separate and it's not competitive. So let's take wrestling. And I was talking with one of your friends, I believe, or someone who wrestled here or hasn't wrestled at school yet. She has a torn labrum. Her name was Olivia. We were saying sports are sort of allegorical, analogous for war, right? In a lot of ways. It's a way of sort of competing without killing each other. So take wrestling, where we know it's not even remotely competitive. Now apply killing. We need the most effective fighting force possible. Just like I wouldn't send out a woman, for example, to wrestle Cael Sanderson, I wouldn't send a woman who can't do a pull-up, and that's the majority of female recruits in the military. I would not send her out to war. But she doesn't lose a match. She loses her life, and so does the guy next to her relying on her. I think it's important, more important than diversity.
Again, I'm going to bring it back to the standard point. I think that's an issue with the standards we have in the military, in the police force. I think the standards aren't high enough. Again, I
agree.
We can argue that there is a biological difference, but again, you're also talking about people have guns, they have a lot of technological advancements. Today's military technologically is off the charts. Like, it is crazy how much money we put into the military every single day, technologically advancing ourselves.
Sure.
So,
I actually agree with the statement you just made. I think it's very important. Where you said, for example, guns, advancement, let's just say in firearms. That does equalize the playing field, right, in a lot of ways. Okay, so it's a perfect example. For the same reason I support women being able to carry firearms, and I actually support them carrying firearms because it's the only way to be stronger than a man. It's a mechanical advantage, right? Yes, we have advances in firearms. It's still the only way that a woman could overpower a strong man. Flip side of that coin, the police force, a woman will have to use a firearm. She'll have to use a weapon because she can't physically subdue a man. And that, I don't believe, is something where you talk about de-escalation. If you have to go to your tool belt because you cannot physically restrain a 250-pound man on PCP,
but do you
that's not a good
always
thing.
have to? Because I'm saying between men and women, I'm saying in the police force in general, like, I don't remember the exact number, so I can't really quote on this, but I know for a fact that there is not enough training on de-escalation. Like, they barely do any training on it at all. I agree with the statement that
I agree with you, they
women
should train
are-
that robustly.
Okay, I agree that you're saying like men and women, like women are physically smaller, we are biologically different. But I'm saying in general, you can't put the whole argument on just women rather than putting it on a structural problem.
Right, and I
It's
believe the
not
structural problem is
completely on women.
because of the matriarchy and the problem with feminism trying to lower standards to accommodate women.
But can't you say it's also sexism because it's the idea that, like I was saying before, like you were talking about in the military how a lot of it is, there's a lot of things given to women, and it's like the men should be, we're talking about like, for example, mental health, for example, now we were saying that like,
Women are more likely to PTSD, be discharged.
but it's also because men aren't treated as seriously for it because it's like,
that could be true. It's an
Toxic.
inference, but I think your inference might be correct.
yes. That could also be, instead of saying because of feminists, it could also be because of sexism.
Towards men? Mm-hmm. You may be correct on that. I think it's probably a little column A, a little column B. I think we have quite a lot of data that shows that men tend to perform better under high compression stress scenarios than women in general. There are always exceptions to the rule. And it tends to be more traumatic for women. And then especially when you combine, right, being on the receiving end of a traumatic injury in the military. Same thing in the police force. But you mentioned de-escalation. Now you wrestle. So you have some understanding of, I would say, controlling or subduing the human body, right? That's what
Sure.
all grappling arts
Sure.
are, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, judo. I do believe that should be trained in the police force so that you don't have to use a weapon. I think that we need higher standards, as a matter of fact. I think every member of the police should have basic grappling capabilities so that they don't have to, for example, grab their gun or grab their taser. Now, de-escalation. I agree with you, that's very important. Here's what I would argue is the reality of de-escalation. You can only de-escalate if you have the nuclear option. What do I mean? You can't de-escalate with a large, strong, likely inebriated man who doesn't want to go back to prison if he sees a small, weak woman trying to de-escalate. He knows that he has a trump card and he can attack you. Statistically, it happens a lot. De-escalation can only take place with formidable capability. And women don't have that physically, as a general rule. Not all women, and certainly most of the women in our police force today.
For me, okay, I'm not disagreeing with your statement. I actually kind of agree with your statement. My only thing is, again, like I said, for de-escalation, when I think of de-escalation, I think of more like, you know, like physical therapy. You know how we learn about the cognitive whatever. Like, you've ever,
therapy.
yeah, you've ever heard about like you've ever taken a psychology class?
Sure.
Okay, and they teach us about like different things about the human like behavior and things like that. I feel like the way I think about it is I feel like cops should be taught that because they should be taught how to behave and be like not behave, but you know how to like
No, I agree with what you're saying.
yeah. But
I think it's a very important component of the job, right? I think it's a very important component to be able to de-escalate. And to be fair, most police-civilian interactions, most of them are not violent.
Yeah.
But every single police officer, male or female, will have many violent interactions throughout their career. And it only takes one. And if you're not physically up to the task, and the women in our police force, the vast majority are not all of them, but the vast majority are not, that's a problem. If I can, let me give you, we've talked about the empirical and anecdotal story.
okay.
And I come from a background, I've done judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We don't really have wrestling in Canada, I think it exists.
Oh, Canadian wrestling. Sorry.
I know, it's not very good, yeah. There's the Olympic team, and like George St. and then everyone else. It doesn't happen in high school. But now I'm a new father, and I've also coached kids in Jiu-Jitsu.
Sure.
And here's the problem too. You have a lot of moms, for example, who when they have sons, they will tell them if they're dealing with a bully, and I had this, they say, you walk up to him and you tell him that he better stop. You know, he needs to stop or else. Or you tell him that he needs to stop, that this is, he's just doing it because he feels bad about himself. In other words, whatever techniques that are often told to young boys. It doesn't work if the bully knows he can kick your ass. It happened to me when I was young. I said, well, stop, this is wrong, you need to stop doing this. Well, he said, what? And kicked my ass. Only once I was able to physically defend myself could I de-escalate the situation. And then at that point I could say, look, do you really want to go this route? And that's what we actually teach children. We teach children, we teach them jiu-jitsu. The Gracies actually do this. And it's important we teach the psychology. We say, avoid it. And then if they continue to harass you, ask them, are you challenging me to a fight? So psychologically, the bully has a choice to make. Either yes, in which case you use what you know. Or if he says, most of the time he'll say no, it's de-escalated. But you can only ask that question if you know the answer is yes, that you can handle it. Women can't handle it if they're in an inner city and a man is on PCP. You can't de-escalate from a position of weakness. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
If we didn't have nukes and we told Russia to stop it, think they'd care?
No.
No, exactly. So it does matter. You can only have peace through strength, de-escalation, if they know that when push comes to shove, there are consequences. And the statistics are really scary. Women as far as being on the receiving end of violent attacks when they're police officers. It's not good. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see women getting hurt because of some diversity quota. I don't think that's a good thing for women, and I don't think it's a good thing for the guy next to her.
My thing is, I was talking to, I don't know where that guy went, but I was talking to him about something, and we were talking about how police need to be retrained. They get trained once, and then they go for the job. Men.
So it does matter. You can only have peace through strength, de-escalation, if they know that when push comes to shove, there are consequences. And the statistics are really scary. Women as far as being on the receiving end of violent attacks when they're police officers. It's not good. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see women getting hurt because of some diversity quota. I don't think that's a good thing for women, and I don't think it's a good thing for the guy next to her.
My thing is, I was talking to, I don't know where that guy went, but I was talking to him about something, and we were talking about how police need to be retrained. They get trained once, and then they go for the job. Men too, I feel like over time, he was giving the example, it wasn't me, he was saying like, police officer gets trained at a job, freshly trained, whatever, physically built, whatever. Years go by, he gets fat, he gets slow, he doesn't get retrained, the training basically just leaves his head. I feel like, if you're talking about like that, it's honestly the same. It's like, I don't feel like...
No, I agree. I think that's terrible. I just don't think that the solution is a reverse nirvana fallacy of, well, then let's just lower the standards for everyone. I think we need to raise it. I think we're both agreeing we need to raise the standards. Let me put it this way. Would you agree with me, and I've talked about this in the show, that not only should officers have to display not only physical capabilities as far as strength, endurance, being fit, they also should have to display physical capabilities, for example, in grappling.
I think you should also have mental...
That as well. Mm-hmm. They do have that, but they should have that as well. And they should be forced to repass an exam every year.
I agree.
Yes, okay. Then I think we're agreeing on the same thing. My issue is that exam can't be to a lower standard for women. Right now it is.
Okay, I agree with that. I agree it shouldn't be a lower standard for women. But the thing is, I'm saying again, if a woman passes that exam, again, that statement, you're saying there's not as many women passing that exam, but there are still women passing that exam.
Well, right now there aren't women passing the exam for men because they don't take it. They have a separate exam.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you're saying women shouldn't do it at all, but I'm saying if there is a higher exam, if it's the same as men,
yes,
and if women pass it, are you saying women...
If we hold them to the highest standard possible, mm-hmm, and the women, the probably 1% to 2% of women who apply pass, and afterwards we would look at the real world data and they're just as effective in the police force or military, I would have no problem with it.
Then I agree with that statement. That's the statement I agree with.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was what, Ploy?
Ploy.
I was close. It's a tough name for me to remember with
That's
an
okay.
I. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting down. And are you wrestling this year?
Yeah, we actually have a meet tonight.
Oh, okay. Who are you guys wrestling?
Each other. We're having it's our first year team. Our coach is Randy Miller. She's a bronze Olympian.
Oh wow.
So
good. I'm familiar with Randy Miller a little bit. I don't know her personally, but
so I hope to make her. She's been training us and she handpicked us. So I hope to make her proud.
Well, I hope so too.
If you see this, coach, sorry, coach.
Hopefully you don't run into a bunch of, Dagestanis or Eastern Bloc people, because, boy, they are monsters on the mats. They grow up wrestling bears from when they're 3 years old. But, I have quite a few friends who have gone to international competitions, more so Greco-Roman, because that's more practiced internationally. And, it is a tough sport. So all the respect in the world to you.
Thank you.
Sincerely. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ploy. A little bit of disagreement, though I wouldn't say contentious, and I always appreciate someone willing to step out of their comfort zone. Hopefully some positions might be reconsidered after the conversation. Now, our next guest was really a bright spot in the day because she brought something completely new to this installment. Meet Jay.
Jay, Stephen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Do you mind scooting in just a little bit here? Just so we can, okay. So, Jay, I know you've been waiting a little while. I don't know how familiar you are with kind of these segments, what we do with Change My Mind. It's just hopefully an opportunity to rationalize positions on seemingly controversial topics. Surprisingly, today it hasn't seemed to be that controversial. They've all been respectful thus far. My position, again, sometimes you can't fit it all on the sign. I do not believe that women, biological women, should be in roles of physical combat, enlisted forces, a police force, where they would encounter physical violence, simply because they're more likely to be the victim of violence, they're less safe, and so are their brothers in arms, and the people they're sworn to protect. And legislatively, we have been systematically lowering the barrier to entry and physical and mental requirements in order to accommodate women in these enlisted forces. I think that's a horrible course to be on. If you disagree with me, I'm more than glad to hear you change my mind.
I'm more here to just learn about the other side. Serving our country takes a lot of heart to even begin to think about.
Sure.
And I guess I have family who served, and I really wanted to be ground control for the Air Force a lot.
Okay.
And then I flew a teeny plane, and I was like, yeah, no, I can't do that.
What kind of plane did you fly?
Teeny little Cessna.
Like a Cessna 182? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Little yellow one.
Yeah. Did you get your pilot's license?
No, my dad did though.
Oh, okay. So you did it illegally, I guess. Maybe we shouldn't. Okay, let's just say it was training courses.
It was.
Yeah. Completely on the up and up.
Wonk wonk.
All right.
But I mean, I guess it's such a difficult water to tread. There's a lot of obstacles either way. And I really feel like gosh.
I don't think it's very difficult. Let me ask you this. What's the role of our military?
To protect and serve.
Right. So to do that, you need to be the most effective protective service possible. That's the goal.
Yeah.
We're not accomplishing that by lowering the physical standards and the requirements to a point of, frankly, becoming a national embarrassment in order to accommodate women. That's the only reason we do it. So I don't think it's very complicated. At one point we had standards, for example, that involved load-bearing jogging to a significant degree, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups. They've been eliminated in almost all branches of the military. A Marine female can do half as many pull-ups to achieve a perfect score. And the net result is they incur bone fractures at a very high rate. They're discharged for physical disability at a very high rate. Squads are the result of the victims of violence at a higher rate. Police squads are the victims of violence at a much higher rate when women are on the force, and that's because we've lowered the requirements specifically to accommodate women in the name of diversity. We'd have no problem if the standards were where they always were and the select few women met them. Just none of them did, statistically. That's all it is. It doesn't mean, by the way, that women can't, for example, be ground control or even pilots. Certainly in the police force, investigators, perhaps negotiators, forensic evidence, interrogators, just not on the beat where you have a fellow squad mate who is in physical harm's way if you're not physically capable. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah? Does that sound reasonable?
Well, it's your point of view, and so I take it with as much respect as I take mine.
Well, what's your point? Forgive me, I don't understand your point of view. What's your point of view? Because here's the reality, right? We've lowered physical requirements to accommodate women. They still fail, the vast majority of them anyway. We can't really lower them much more. But they're getting into the military now with a much lower standard, and the results are bad. I think that's bad. What's your point of view, just so I understand?
Gosh, I never really thought about it that much. Well,
that's okay. If you haven't thought about it, then maybe you don't have your point of view established, and that's okay.
Well, that's part of why I'm here, is to see how that stands up against something else that I'm not familiar with. Well, I mean...
Can I ask you something? Why do you think you're unfamiliar with my stance? Because it's shared by at least half the country.
Well, I've not really taken a lot of consideration myself in being in the forces, and so I haven't really looked personally at what that could look like for me or someone like me. I know women who have served and fought and men who have served and fought, so my general consensus is that they served, So to me, it's really not that much about it. I guess for me, it would depend person to person, and that would, I guess, it would really create a lot of problems, and I do see that with individualizing someone who's serving so much based on all these different things. Like, I know I'm unqualifiable because I'm tiny. You could shoot a bazooka and I'd go flying,
Well, if you shot a bazooka at me, I'd go flying. That's kind of the purpose of a bazooka. I don't think any of us would survive. Oh, you mean if you fired it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I do believe that with such a difficult task of serving your country in any sense, I mean, it could be taxing even if you're not in a combatant role.
Sure.
Physically, mentally, psychologically.
I agree.
And so I guess really...
That's why we shouldn't individualize it. We should standardize it.
Yeah. I can see, to me, I think it should really be, I guess, gosh. It's cool to be on the spot like this because now I really get to think about it.
Yeah.
I think, well, I guess there are a lot of people who can't really serve in a combatant role.
Sure.
And so I think generally, there are men who are disabled. There are a lot of different people who can't fight for a lot of different reasons.
Right.
But I think instead of, at least for me personally, instead of worrying about the kind of people we put in, we can focus on how we can make them the best, even if that might mean talking to them and saying, hey, we know you're interested in this, but this might be a better fit. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we can bar them in a combatant sense. But
We're
if
not
we
barring
say,
them on a personal level, though. The requirements, if they don't meet them, bar them.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if you can't throw a grenade.
Or you can't carry, you can't carry a certain load of